$214. That's the median 401k balance for Americans in their 40s. Not their annual contribution, not what they need to retire, what they have right now, the total. And before you tell yourself that number doesn't apply to you, that you're further along, that your situation is different, stay with it for a second. Because the number isn't the point. The point is what it took to end up on the other side of it. You are somewhere in your 40s or early 50s. You have a job. You have a house maybe. You have a number in a retirement account that you check less often than you should because checking it produces a feeling you'd rather not have on a Tuesday morning before work. You know you're behind. You're not sure how far behind. You're also not sure what on track looks like in real numbers, not in percentages, not in vague benchmarks, in the actual dollar amount you would need sitting in an account to stop working and not run out of money before you die. You haven't done that math directly. Most people haven't. Doing it directly means getting an answer, and the answer might be the kind that changes the shape of the next 10 years. Here is the honest number. If you are 50 years old today and plan to retire at 67, you need roughly 25 times your expected annual expenses saved by retirement to have a statistically reasonable chance of your money lasting 30 years. That is the 4% rule, the withdrawal rate that retirement researchers at Trinity University established and that financial planners have been using for decades. At 25 times. If you expect to spend $60,000 a year in retirement, you need $1.5 million. If $80,000 is closer to your number, you need $2 million. If your current balance is $214,000, the math on that gap is not subtle. The shift. You stopped thinking about retirement as a date on a calendar and started thinking about it as a number. Those are different problems with different solutions. You did not get here by accident. Nobody does. You got here the same way almost everyone gets here, through a sequence of rational decisions that each made complete sense at the time, and that collectively added up to a position you did not choose. The car that was too expensive but felt necessary. The years in your 30s when the margin was thin and saving felt impossible, so you saved nothing. The 401k you enrolled in but never increased past the default. The employer match you captured but never exceeded. The decade that passed faster than any decade has a right to pass. None of it was reckless. Most of it was just life. The Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances, released in 2023 covering 2022 data, found that among Americans aged 45 to 54, the median retirement account balance was $115,000. Among 55 to 64-year-olds, the median was $185,000. Not the average, the median. Half of people in those brackets have less, and a significant portion, roughly 1 in 4 working-age Americans, has no retirement savings at all. Zero. No 401k, no IRA, nothing. This is not a story about outliers. This is the center of the distribution. So what did the other 10% do differently? Not the top 1%, the people who inherited wealth or sold a company or got extraordinarily lucky with a stock. The 10% who started from roughly where you are and ended up with enough. What actually separated them? The first rule. The difference between retiring with enough and retiring without enough is almost never income. It is almost always the gap between what you earned and what you spent, maintained across decades. That rule sounds simple. It is simple. It is also the rule that most people hear, nod at, and then do nothing about. Not because they disagree with it, but because simple rules do not tell you how to act on them when your mortgage payment goes up $300, and your kid's college bill arrives, and your car needs work, and everything costs more than it did 3 years ago. The rule doesn't bend when life doesn't bend. That's the whole point of it. This is education, not financial advice. Talk to a qualified financial professional about your specific situation before making any retirement decisions. Here is what the math looks like for someone who starts at 50 with $115,000 and has 17 years until 67. At a 7% average annual return, which is below the S&P 500's historical average, but accounts for a diversified portfolio, that $115,000 grows to roughly $350,000 by 67 with no additional contributions. That's not a retirement, that's a cushion. If you add $1,000 per month in contributions for those 17 years at the same 7% return, you end up with approximately $700,000. Still not enough to live on $60,000 a year for 30 years. If you push contributions to $2,000 per month, which for a household income of $100,000 is a significant but achievable 24% savings rate, you end up with roughly $1.1 million. That starts to look like something. Not everything, but something. Social Security adds to it. A paid-off house adds to it. The decision to spend $55,000 a year instead of $70,000 in retirement changes the math dramatically. None of this is meant to make the problem feel manageable when it isn't. It is meant to show you that the math still works in your favor if you start now and keep going. The math also stops working entirely if you wait another 2 years deciding whether to start. The shift. Every month you delay is not a neutral act. It is a choice with a specific dollar cost. At $2,000 per month in contributions and 7% returns, every 12 months of delay costs you roughly $40,000 in final balance at retirement. You can calculate that cost precisely. Most people never do. What did the 10% actually do? They automated it before they could spend it. That is the single most consistent behavior across people who successfully accumulate retirement wealth. Not income, not market timing, not sophisticated investment strategy. Automation. The money moved from their paycheck into a retirement account before they made any other financial decision. It happened the way rent happens, the way the electric bill happens, as a fixed obligation that the rest of the budget had to work around. Not as what was left over. What was left over is always zero. Always. It has been zero for 40 years of personal finance research across every income bracket. The money that does not move automatically before you see it does not get saved. This is not a character flaw. It is how human brains process available money. The 10% who got it right did not have better willpower. They set up a system that made willpower irrelevant. The second rule: you cannot outdecide a system that isn't built yet. Set up the system. The decisions take care of themselves. Here's what that looks like in practice in 2026. If your employer offers a 401k with a match, you should be contributing at minimum enough to capture the full match. That is a 100% return on that portion of your money before any market growth occurs. If you are not capturing the full match, you are leaving your own money on the table. Beyond the match, the IRS allows you to contribute up to $23,500 to a 401k in 2026 if you're under 50, and $31,000 if you're 50 or older. That $7,500 additional amount is the catch-up contribution that exists specifically for people in exactly your position. If your employer does not offer a 401k, a traditional or Roth IRA allows up to $7,000 per year, plus the $1,000 catch-up if you're over 50. These numbers are not small. The question is what you redirect to get there. The shift. You have been thinking about retirement savings as what's left after everything else. The 10% treated it as what came first, and everything else was what was left. There are people right now, not hypothetical people, real people in your exact income bracket, who are contributing $2,500 per month to retirement accounts by doing things that did not feel like sacrifices after the first year. Driving a paid-off car 4 years longer than they planned. Not renovating the kitchen this decade. Taking the vacation that costs $4,000 instead of the one that costs $11,000. Dropping the subscriptions that accumulated over 7 years of saying yes and never saying no. None of these are dramatic. None of them required a personality transplant. They required a decision, and then a system, and then about 18 months before they stopped feeling like deprivation and started feeling like the thing that was buying the future they wanted. If you're watching this and that number, the balance you're sitting on right now, feels like the kind of number that changes the next 10 years, drop it in the comments. You'll see you are not alone. The third rule: the sacrifices that feel impossible before you make them almost always feel obvious a year later. The only way to find out is to make them. Now here's the part that most content in this space skips because it is uncomfortable to say directly. Some people watching this cannot contribute $2,000 a month. The math is real. The gap is real. The catch-up contribution window is real. And for a portion of the people who found this video, the honest answer is that traditional full retirement at 67 on savings alone is not the most likely outcome. And the plan needs to account for that honestly, rather than pretending otherwise. What does that mean? It means Social Security timing matters more than it does for people with large account balances. The difference between claiming at 62 and waiting until 70 is roughly 77% more per month, permanently. For someone with limited savings, that decision alone can add $800 or $1,000 per month to their retirement income for the rest of their life. It means part-time work in retirement is not a failure state, it is a financial strategy. Working 20 hours a week at $20 an hour generates $20,000 a year. That is $20,000 less that must come from savings. The math on portfolio longevity changes dramatically when you take that pressure off. It means housing equity is an asset, not just a number on a statement. For someone who owns a paid-off home or is close to it, the option to downsize and capture that equity exists. It is not the plan. It is a contingency that changes the risk profile entirely. The fourth rule. The retirement plans that accounts for what might go wrong is the one that works. The plan that only works if everything goes right is not a plan. It is a hope. None of this is easy to hear. The reason 90% of Americans are not on track for retirement is not that they are bad at math. Most of them know the math. The reason is that the math requires behavior change across years and decades, and behavior change is hard, and life is expensive, and the future always feels further away than it is until it doesn't. The 10% are not smarter. They are not luckier, not most of them. What they did was decide at some point in their 40s or 50s, or sometimes their 30s, that the discomfort of saving more today was a better kind of discomfort than the specific kind that comes from being 68 years old and doing the math on what's left. They chose their hard thing. They chose it deliberately. And then they built a system that made the choice automatic, so they didn't have to keep choosing it every month. You are in your 40s or 50s. You are still inside the window. The window is smaller than it was 5 years ago. It is larger than it will be 5 years from now. What you do in the next 12 months matters more to your retirement outcome than anything you did in the 12 years before this moment. Because the math of compound growth means that the contributions you make now are worth more than they have ever been relative to your remaining runway. The fifth rule. The best time to start was 10 years ago. The second best time has a specific date, and it is not tomorrow. The shift. You stopped looking at the balance as a verdict on the past, and started looking at it as the starting point for the next 17 years. Those are different numbers with different stories. Somewhere tonight, there is a 49-year-old sitting at a kitchen table with a retirement account statement in front of them and a feeling they have been carrying for longer than they want to admit. They think this story is about whether they saved enough. It is. It is also about the moment they decided that the next 10 years were going to look different from the last 10. Not because someone inspired them, but because they ran the actual numbers, in real dollars, with a real retirement date, and the math was clear enough that it stopped being possible to look away. The statement is on the table. The window is still open. What happens next is not decided yet.